Hello, I'm John Bachman. Welcome to Newsmax TV. Joining us now in the studio is Oliver McGee. He is a professor of mechanical engineering at Howard University. He's also the author of the new book, Jumping the Aisle: How I Became a Black Republican in the Age of Obama. You also served as an advisor to President Clinton as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Transportation. So this has been quite a shift for you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, John. I'm very happy to be with Newsmax.
Well, we're very happy to have you here. And before I ask the most obvious question, which is how you became a Republican, I want to go back, though, and talk about what made you a Democrat. What made you identify yourself as a Democrat before your political shift?
Well, my entire family comes from the Democratic Party. And when I was raised my father was the first black fireman from the city of Cincinnati. He passed a test for stepping into the Cincinnati public service, and they just wrote an article on him in the Cincinnati Enquirer and making that history. And so that was my first taste of watching my dad take our family from straight into the middle class. It was $18,000 a year to become a fireman in the city of Cincinnati, and we were instantly pushed into the middle class. And my mom was a teacher in the North Avondale Elementary School, for which I was there. So all of a sudden I was working in essentially a charter school, and watching a laborman turn fireman and a mother turn into a teacher, I began to start understanding the democratic values of education and working for the government, and how it can do development into a black family, into the middle class.
And two careers that are often associated with unions, so I'm sure that had something to do with it as well. Okay, so you were brought up as a Democrat, but then around 2008, right around the time that President Obama was getting elected, you started changing your thinking a little bit. Tell me, what was the main reason why?
Well, we saw the rise of Clinton, and obviously I decided to, upon meeting one of my mentors, Chuck Vest at MIT, who was the president of MIT, he encouraged me to look at public understanding of science and technology, so I decided to serve the Clinton administration and following his advice. And he put me into the White House working for Jack Gibbons, who was Clinton's science advisor. And so I was exposed to a lot of the ideas of Clintonism, and I really enjoyed that. And so when we went to the 2008 election and his wife was planning to run, I said, well, Clinton taught me a fundamental rule: remember those who brung you. So I was out campaigning for the Clinton campaign, and that was run by another mentor of mine, Bob Nash, who was a deputy campaign director. And so I was really engaged in that. But then the emergence of the age of Obama, I wasn't quite sure where that came from, and most of the folks at Clinton were kind of rocked by that. And so the party was trying to find its way to unite the two tickets, and when they actually didn't unite, I often say that when the party went far left, I turned right. So the first chapter of my book is when my party left, I turned right.
So it was the exclusion of Hillary Clinton from the ticket. You wanted to see an Obama-Clinton ticket, and when President Obama excluded her from the vice presidential slot, that was the tipping point for you.
Yeah, I thought that was a great opportunity for the first black president, the first woman vice president, or vice versa, but that was also testing the value of diversity, for which many of us saw that Clinton was trying to do, and obviously Bush went on and did very, very well in testing the value of diversity at the White House, which is really important. And so that's what I saw. That was an opportunity coming off that legacy to push it even further.
Let's talk about, even though we've seen President Clinton campaigning very passionately on behalf of President Obama, right, you would say there's clearly a distinction, and you point out many of the distinctions in the book between President Obama and Clinton. What would you say are the biggest two or three distinctions between an Obama presidency and the Clinton presidency we saw?
First and foremost, I think Clinton paid very close attention to job creation. I think he understood exactly how that took place on Main Street. He was also center-left, not so far to the left in his campaigning, in the far reaches the left side of the party. He was more in the center-left, where the country pretty much so is. And at the time for his campaign, but I always say the country is really center-right and always has been,
Sure.
and always will be. But if you're center-left, moderates can kind of form into that. But when you start looking at job creation and growth on Main Street, Clinton understood that very well. But he also had a moderation to understand the tenets of Wall Street and making some of the policies in that direction. He had a very fine Treasury Secretary, Robert Rubin, who I think really played into Clinton's understanding of economic dimensions of the presidency. And so that's a little bit of a different focus than what you might see from the Obama era, which looks more at a broader range of issues and social issues that are, I think they want to take bigger bites in regulatory reform. And some might say that Obamacare might have been an overreach. And I've come to the conclusion in the book that how can someone pay for health care if they don't have a job? And if you don't have a job, that leads to more stress. And so you want to have that pretty well settled first before you start going into the reaches of health care.
We can't talk about the President Obama's presidency without talking about race. And we have heard from pundits on the left that President Obama receives an overly difficult time because of his race. There are charges of racism coming, the left blaming the right for racism all the time. Is there any validity to this at all?
I think that America has proven that it has made a very strong attempt to stretch beyond the limitations or the dimensions of race. But we cannot ignore that when you mix race and politics and religion together, you have a very interesting dinner party. Because they say at a dinner party, those are the three topics that you don't bring up unless you want to still continue your dinner party. So we're at a dinner party right now, and we're trying to make the decision on this decision 2012. So it's a mix and it's an undercurrent. But I'm very happy to see in this particular campaign is not front and center, because I believe when you do bring it in front and center, it confuses voters, and I think it basically is a loser. Right now, when the economy is the biggest issue right now, that's really where you want to put it front and center. But if you look at the economy, it's really not necessarily about race more than it is about the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And then when you start looking at who has and who has not, and vice versa, race has a component into that.
There is a disparity in terms of who's been more adversely affected by this economy. Yes. For instance, the black unemployment rate is up about 14%, much higher than that for whites. Yeah. Since the title of your book, I assume you're supporting Governor Romney. Yes. How do you think a Romney presidency would benefit minorities, especially in terms of job creation, better than a second term for the Obama administration? Yeah,
I was having a discussion one time with one of my mentors, Dr. Julian M. Earls, who is former director of NASA Glenn Research Center. And we engineers and scientists are putting our heads together on some of these issues because we are, as engineers, come up with solutions. And he brought a very good point to me that said, you know, naturally, when you look at the black community, we are conservative. We're conservative about our pocketbooks and our wallets. We're conservative about how we manage our homes. My own home was a very conservative home about education, even about the work ethic. My father being the first black fireman, that's a conservative field. Both fields are. It's a conservative, I was raised conservatively, and most black families are. So with that, it's not unusual to find us as black Republicans, or even if we're on the Democratic side, we're center left, not necessarily always far left. Because we're moderate, because we have to be. We have to be flexible and adaptable. So one of the reasons I wrote The Jumping the Aisle is because to be an African American in this country, you have to be flexible and adaptable. You have to be ready to jump the aisles all of your life. I've jumped aisles all my life in order to be able to engage and still keep moving forward. So in the answer to your question, the Romney plan is really a 5-point plan. It's about jobs and growth. And that's depending on energy independence. It's about money exchange between China and the U.S. China sends boats over here full of stuff for Walmarts and Targets, but we send that boat back to China empty. How's that working for us? It's about saving Wall Street. And that may be an unpopular subject, but Wall Street does need to be saved, especially when we reduce the debt. The $16 trillion debt is 133% times our GDP. That's basically long-run demand exceeding short-run GDP by 133%. And the difference that ties long-run demand to short-run supply is a single point in time called price. And when you have that ratio, long-run demand to short-run supply being 133%, that's a high price. And then finally, if you take a look at this plan talking about skills development, if we don't build the skills that are necessary in science and technology and engineering and mathematics for young people, and then giving families choice for schools, including voucher choice, how are we going to be ready on getting to 2076, which I end my book on getting to 2076, America's Tercentennial, how we're going to be prepared in that innovation enterprise in science and technology for America that's worked for us so well since 1776.
And you think Governor Romney has a better plan for that, despite what we heard from President Obama about his education plans? We saw a lot of education discussed in the debates. Let's talk about the black electorate as a whole. And it wasn't until the mid-20th century when a lot of black voters tended to start voting Democratic. It was about 50-50 up until that point. Yeah. Nowadays, we have guys like you, Allen West, Ron Christie, Arthur Davis, Mia Love, all Republicans. Are we actually seeing more black Republicans, or are we just hearing more about them in this state? And if there is a groundswell of black conservatives coming out, do you see it getting back to the 50-50 ratio that we saw in the mid-20th century? How much do you see the electorate splitting?
It's interesting you talk about that groundswell. I think that's probably a very good way of putting it. I've never heard it put that way. One of the things I think black Republicans are beginning to say is that when you run across one of us, we do actually exist. I was talking with a media outlet one time, and they said, "You know what, Oliver, you don't exist." I go, "Really?" I think we're beginning to see sort of the conservative a rise of black conservatism.
And we should mention Herman Cain, of course, as well, that I left out. But yeah,
it's a big family. And that, to me, the reason I wrote this book, because I wanted to say that if you look at black political thought, I think it's much more diverse. I think it's a much more diverse portfolio than what is publicly perceived. We're not all crunched to the far left reaches of the party. There's a wide dimension of thinking across social, economic, and political aspects. And we need to do that if we're going to try to create more technology development coming out of our community, which is so important for our educational enterprise. So I think it's really healthy to see the diverse discourse that takes place within the African American community about social, political, economic, and technological and economic forces. I think it's really important that comes forth in a larger debate across the country.
Well, you mentioned science and technology is so important for the future of this country. And there's a lot of great points in this book. The new book is called Jumping the Aisle. Oliver McGee, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.